Welcome to the NBA Trades Podcast. I'm your host, Raphael, and I'm finally back after some time of disappearance. The NBA Trades Podcast is back with a new episode, and I have a special guest. It is my bro, Anthony, AC Spotlight 95. Anthony, what's up? How you doing?
I'm good. Happy to have you back on your own podcast. It's been a while, man. Happy NBA Trades is back up and running. Let's get this party started.
Well, I don't know if it's a party necessarily, but
it's always a party.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll keep it going. So I guess we'll start off with the first topic. Anthony Davis. That story by Woj came out yesterday about, it's sort of, I call it the unofficial, official, you're on the clock now trade demands from the player. And it's sort of in a weird way, like it feels like this happens with almost every player, where a reporter does a big story on them and sort of like, oh, it's been struggles through the season and they haven't really figured out how they're going to play, or if this guy, like, building around this superstar. We've seen it with everybody from LeBron to Paul George to, you know, Anthony Davis now. And it's sort of funny because it's sort of like, it's like everyone now is aware, okay, so-and-so team is on the clock, and if they don't figure it out, it's going to be a hot mess. And I'm interested to see what happens with Anthony Davis in the next coming years. If the Pelicans are able to hold on to him, obviously they have to show that they have a good roster intact when he becomes a free agent or when he's nearing his free agency. But it's going to be a very difficult decision if they have to trade him, because obviously Anthony Davis is one of the premier talents in the NBA. What do you think?
Well, I think the interesting thing about it is he has a player option for the 21-22 season. So you kind of have to think about, what are we? Actually, I should say the 2021 season. Excuse me. And what I wonder is, are they going to wait till maybe next year? Like, I feel like if DeMarcus decides to re-sign with them, let's say that happens, then you could say maybe there's a better chance of him staying, because at least you still have... Because I think to this point that we've seen that the two of them can coexist together, and they've actually they've played pretty well. Anthony Davis be hurt again this season and miss a certain amount of games, and then of course, as you alluded to, the roster around them not being, very good. Not a lot of talent on that team. So I think that's an issue, and it's going to be interesting to see whether Anthony Davis looks at what all of these other guys have done in the past and probably wants to preemptively be like, let me get out of here before I get stuck in a situation where I'm going to be playing for a team that has no chance to contend for a title. And then I think, fans are just as responsible for these guys having that type of mentality, because like the whole rings conversation has kind of polluted the air for players in the sense that they always feel like they want to escape that criticism, that they don't want to be like Carmelo and Chris Paul, who always have to hear about either not making the conference finals or not being in the conversation of being a championship contender. So, he's going to have to weigh those decisions going forward. But I want to see first what happens with DeMarcus, because he's a free agent after the season. So whether they keep him or not could go a long way onto whether they trade.
Yeah, and I think it's up in the air. I think a lot of DeMarcus's situation depends on how well the team does this year, and if obviously any of the teams that this upcoming summer are good enough. And right now the Pelicans are 26 in defensive rating, so it's things are not surprisingly, the defense has been a bigger problem than people initially expected, and what issues they went through when Cousins was traded last year at the deadline to New Orleans, they struggled offensively to, fit both of them. And they're playing pretty well right now. They're 8th in offensive rating, so they're sort of just a middle-of-the-road team. They have a legit shot at the playoffs. Do you think that just hinge on making the playoffs, or do you think that it, like a lot of players nowadays, Gordon Hayward left Utah for Boston, made the second round, and that wasn't good enough. And so I think that there's a lot more pressure that just getting to the playoffs really doesn't change anything or changes.
Yeah, I think, that's an interesting question, because I wonder does that matter, because I wonder what ownership is thinking as far as first, like the head coach and the GM doing a good job. And it's so like hard to actually really analyze both of those guys. You could say Dell Demps has done a poor job for sure. Gentry has kind of like been, whether you want to call him a good coach or not, he's been saddled with a roster that has not been able to, it's just not good enough. So that's the thing that you have to weigh is that the team is clearly not good enough to contend. I think maybe that'll convince him to stay, especially because DeMarcus has never made the playoffs. So that him getting a taste of the playoffs would be interesting to see, and maybe change his mind, or maybe put his mind in a more positive state. But with everything you hear about the medical staff, with everything you hear about all their issues that they've had in the past couple of seasons, and even Anthony Davis, all this murmuring and the stuff and the fact that he's even started to say something, would lead you to believe that this is headed down the wrong path. So odds are it is probably not going to matter anyway. And that's the thing, that West, the bottom of the West is so open right now with all of the injuries. So I guess it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. So I'm not sure if they're gonna necessarily do anything after the season either. I think they may just try and hold things over with Anthony Davis, pending, of course, what happens with DeMarcus, which we could end up going back to that same conversation. So as far as the playoffs are concerned, whether they make it or not, I wonder if that's actually going to matter.
I agree. I think also, the Boston being mentioned in the story says a lot, because everyone has sort of said Andy Davis is the next big superstar that Boston is going to pursue in a trade, or, if he were to be a free agent. What do you think about Andy Davis and all of the young talent that the Celtics have? Obviously, they've been great this year early on, the best record in the East so far. That'd be crazy, right?
I mean, it'd be a great combination, Kyrie and Anthony Davis. You could talk about that on its own, plus Al Horford. That'd be one hell of a front court. You have Al Horford being able to be as versatile as he is, and what a really good all-around player that he's become. And Anthony Davis is a combination. That'd be a pretty tremendous when you think about it. What they would probably have to do is, I would assume, if there would be any type of trade, one of Brown and Tatum probably would have to be included in the deal. Plus, I'm sure one of their upcoming first rounders. And that's what makes it interesting. And this is where, as a general manager, does ownership want Dell Demps making that trade? That's another thing that's going to be in flux. Whether Dell Demps is going to keep his job. Like, we may not know who the actual general manager is going to be by the time that they do have to make that trade. So that's like another variable that you could throw into the mix. But as far as like Boston is concerned, that would be a hell of a mix, and that would definitely put them in the conversation. Like, legitimately, as much as the Celtics have played well this year, still with the best record in the East to this point, you could still be like LeBron still owns this until proven otherwise. But Anthony Davis could definitely make that different as LeBron continues to get older. So I know Boston has been in on almost like every player that you could think of in terms of if that guy's going to get traded, where is he most likely to end up? Because they always have the most assets and the most things to give up. So if they were able to do that trade, that would be a huge coup for them.
Word. So I guess we'll move on to another topic. So I guess we'll start looking into how trades that happen in the offseason, how they're working out, how the teams are doing. So we've hit, like, you know, teams are at about the 30-game mark. And one of the teams that, you know, made a big swing in the draft was Minnesota. They acquired Jimmy Butler at the draft for the draft picks. Lauri Markkanen was involved. He was Chris Dunn, Zach LaVine. And so, you know, the Jimmy Butler experiment with Minnesota has generally been okay. It's worked. And he's been pretty good, pretty solid for them. But I feel like a lot of people still have this feeling that Minnesota is not really living up to expectations. And over probably like the past 8 to 10 games, they've sort of just traded win for loss in a lot of close games. You know, they lost the Philadelphia game at home in overtime. They lost to Phoenix. They've beaten who they beat? Who they beat recently? They beat Portland in that close game where the foul call, where they said that where Lillard complained at the end, about the free throw disparity. And so they've won some close games, and they've been in a lot of close games, but they just have been sort of shaky. Obviously, their offense has been great. They're top 5, sort of like when you think of New Orleans, how I mentioned that they're top 5. They're 5th in offensive efficiency, but they're 25th in defensive efficiency, which totally doesn't represent what a Tom Thibodeau team is. It's like a flip side team, and you know, he's been criticized as head coach for his rotations this year. The minutes are very big gap in minutes between the 5 starters and the rest of the roster, the bench. And a lot of people wonder, can this team sort of survive playing so many minutes? But in a lot of ways, that's sort of what's kept them going. All of their starters have a positive net rating. Moments where they look really good, but then they have moments where they just cannot get anything right. And I think the watershed moment was that Philadelphia game where Karl-Anthony Towns' defense was really bad. He let Ben Simmons slip in 2 or 3 baskets in that game from that.
He's had his struggles on defense. Specifically, going to be something that necessarily will improve. What's interesting is their offense is not necessarily a problem. I look at the shot distribution between Butler, Wiggins, and Townsend. It's pretty even. So and of course you mentioned that they're 5th in offensive rating, so they don't have an issue there. I guess it's just maybe this team needs some time. I don't know. I feel like the Timberwolves kind of are where they're supposed to be at this moment, being necessarily better this year. Because I think what happens is with expectations and how of what the Timberwolves should be. Like last year, they expected the Timberwolves to be a playoff team, and they clearly weren't a playoff team. This year, people expect them to be a contender, and I expect them this year to be a playoff team. So if you see there, like everybody's like kind of like a year ahead. So I would say next year, given some time together with these guys and having a season together, then you would have maybe a little bit more of an expectation that maybe you would think that they can maybe have a better chance to contend to go a little deeper in the playoffs next year. As far as this year is concerned, I think I think they're fine. I don't think it's like that big of a deal that they are where they are right now. I think it's fair to say that Tibbs could do some things that are issues in terms of minutes and rotations, and I played very well this year, but still, it's like they may be better overall with Towns just playing center most of the time. And you wonder whether that's going to happen going forward. So, I'm not sure about whether that's what they're going to do. But if you had to ask me, I think they're all right. Everything that I've seen from them this year is not a surprise. And I think Jimmy Butler's been really good this season for the most part. I think he's brought a very calming presence. He's brought a veteran presence to this team. And I think they're in good shape. They're in good shape to be a playoff team, and depending on the matchup, maybe win around and gain some valuable experience for next season. But, I mean, to expect them to contend this year it's just not realistic. It's not going to happen. It's just not.
It's just not. As the 4th seed, well, yeah, because either way, even if they win their first round matchup.
That's what I'm saying. You could win the first round, and that's fine. And then you play Warriors or Rockets, but I think the issue is it's hard to just be like, when there's so much roster turnover in the league now, it's so hard to camaraderie that one would expect of a team like the Rockets. I know they brought in Chris Paul, but you know they're in the second year of Eric Gordon. They've had Ariza there for a couple seasons, and Ryan Anderson's in his second season. So there's been some build-up, and obviously the Warriors have build-up. San Antonio, they have a roster that's kind of been together for a couple of years. Cleveland, at least for the most part, I know they've done some turnover, but they've had a roster for the most part that's been together for a couple of years. So when you have that continuity, it's a lot easier to compete, and it's a lot easier to go out in the season and be consistent. I can see why the Timberwolves are not consistent. They changed their point guard. They changed Zach LaVine for Jimmy Butler. That's a huge adjustment. Karl Towns has had to take a step back in terms of his usage. So has Andrew Wiggins. So all of those things, you got to put them all together and take those things into consideration. So that's why I think the Timberwolves are fine. They're fine with where they are right now, and I want to see how this team grows throughout the regular season, and hopefully they win a round, and that would be fun to see. And then we'll see how they progress.
Yeah, I guess the one thing is probably the pressure of like the contracts, because Butler is in, is due for an extension eventually, or he's gonna be a free agent.
I think next year, right?
Yeah, and Karl-Anthony Towns is a contract extension from his rookie contract. So it sort of puts you in a position where if they're spending, for the three of them, making a lot of money, and then they're sort of forced to figure out how they're going to put their bench together, their rotations and the backup players.
About Lonzo Ball already writing him off after a couple months. And I know Towns has had a little more time. He's had a couple years. And they're just writing him off defensively when it's hard for me to be like at 21 or 22 years old and say a guy is this and he's just going to be this. So I know, as you said, the contract thing is important, but it's hard to deny that Towns is still a really good prospect, and somebody who you would want to build your franchise around, one would think.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is that he's a really good player. Obviously, you see like the numbers and what he's able to produce, and also just his skill set. He could shoot threes. He's probably their best shooter on their team, and he's a really good rebounder, and he can score in the post. It really does take time before you understand it, and it also just depends on the player. Some players get it right away. You sort of need to be... There's more expected of you than if you're just a wing defender. And there's more value because of their ability to protect the rim or affect shots at the rim. So it is important. And, or out of every player, everyone has their flaws. Okay, so do you think that the Bulls front office is thinking, how can we just get someone injured so that we could lose some games?
It's funny. I wonder if they're actually thinking that. But it's going to be funny. What's going to happen when Zach LaVine comes back, and what if he actually is playing well? Which would not be that huge of a leap to think that Zach LaVine, given some time coming off of the ACL, that once he gets his feet under him, he begins to play well, and then this kind of continues. Because I know they're 30th in offense, and they're actually 18th in defense, which is surprising considering who's on the roster. But yeah, it's like I haven't seen enough of them. The only game that I really paid attention to was when they beat the Knicks a couple of weeks ago. I think it was a Saturday night. They beat the Knicks. Yeah, they beat them when they had that lead and the Knicks came back and then they were able to. That's right. They got fouled at the end and they hit a couple of free throws to win the game. But yeah, it'd be funny if they got into a situation. I mean, they're playing Orlando tonight, so they could win that game. They're at home against Orlando, so it's clearly possible that they could be looking at 7 in a row. And it's not like everybody in the East, especially because Atlanta is so bad, that this could definitely change their draft. Now, there's still so much season left that this could easily go the other way, but they've kind of shown themselves to be a little competent the last couple of weeks. So that's going to be fun to watch if they continue that along those lines, which I'm sure ownership probably and the organization probably didn't want to see to this point, because they need another infusion of young talent on the team. But that'll be fun to see when Zach LaVine comes back, what this is going to look like.
Yeah, in the month of December, they're 7th in defensive rating and 13th in offensive rating. So they've proved themselves very capable over the past, 2-ish weeks. So who knows what could happen, especially with their schedule if they keep winning games. It could make the East even more complicated because there are several teams, pretty much from the 4th seed down to, past 8, 11, 12. There are a lot of teams competing for playoff spots in the East who are hovering from 2 games under 500 to, 2 or 3 games over. So it looks like it's going to be like last year, how complicated, it was with Indiana, Miami, and Chicago. Actually, those 3 teams were the ones competing for that last playoffs, or the last 2 playoff spots. And so, and I think Detroit was also pretty much in the race until the last 4 or 5 games. So, it's going to be complicated, I think, again this year, depending on obviously the Knicks and their schedule, which I think is a good segue. The New York Knicks, they have they made a big trade right before media day and training camp started. They traded Carmelo Anthony and got back Enes Kanter, Doug McDermott, and I think it was a 2nd round pick. And a lot of people have talked about the Knicks, how impressive Kristaps Porzingis has been this year, and how the Knicks are better off without Melo Ball. And they beat the Thunder. I mean, for what it's worth, I don't know. But they beat the Thunder on Saturday, and in Carmelo's return to Madison Square Garden. The Knicks have been impressive. They won, I think, 4 in a row before losing to the Charlotte Hornets in a very bad road loss. So the Hornets team that has been struggling this year. I mean, the Knicks are a interesting team because they've had a really good, favorable schedule. They've had a huge amount of home games and have not played on the road too much. Their strength of schedule in regards to home and road has been pretty soft and pretty nice. They will have a very tough stretch in January where they play most of their games on the road, so it definitely is going to even out. Eventually everything evens out. You play 41 at home, 41 at road at the end of the year. And, it's tough to really get a gauge for this team because I think a lot of people have also brought up how the past 2 years they've sort of been at the 25 to 30 game mark, have been okay. They've been a 500 team. I think 2 years ago they were 3 games over 500 last year. And then everything just completely fell apart after 35 games. And the Knicks ended up losing 50 games. I think 1 year losing... maybe they lost 50 games both years. But they ended up being really bad after. What do you think about this team? Do you think this team is following down the same path as the previous 2 years? And what has surprised you about this team maybe compared to the other teams?
I would say the one thing that surprises me more than anything else is that they're 11th in offense. I thought, especially if you watch the first 3 games, how bad they were at the start, and then they changed. They put Jarrett Jack as a starting point. Jarrett Jack being effective in 2017 is still something that I'm still trying to get adjusted to, and it's still funny because he's actually been pretty good. He's obviously a turnstile for the most part defensively, but he's gotten the team in good position and he's run the team well. So I got to give him that. I'm surprised that Enes Kanter, even with some of his injuries as of late, that he's played as well as he has. I think that's been a huge part of it. I'm also surprised at the fact that Porzingis has missed some time, and I know I think they're 1-6 without him, but still they've been able to manage the time that even with the time that he's missed and the time that he's been on the court. For the most part, they've been a solid team. They're not. They're not a pushover. For the most part, they've been really competitive. So I think from that perspective that you have to be surprised. And the fact that they're not at the bottom defensively, they're actually 16th. That's a surprise too, considering the fact that they do play Cantor at center. And the fact that they have 4 centers, and Hornacek, to his credit, has not played Noah because obviously at this point Noah's not really an effective NBA player, and the fact that he's been able to do that, and even unfortunately Hernan Gomez has kind of been out of the rotation for the most part this season. Kyle O'Quinn has been more effective coming off the bench, and Frank Ntilikina, he has his warts here and there. He could be a little bit more aggressive on offense, but he's shown in bits and spurts that there's something there. I'm not sure if it's something substantial yet, but he's shown flashes. So you like to see somebody that they put a lot of stock in the draft, which is weird because Phil Jackson was the one who put a lot of stock in him, and he's not here anymore. But the fact that Ntilikina has contributed to the Knicks, to some of the Knicks' more impressive wins on the season, has been really good. And you want to see if KP can stay healthy throughout the season. That's going to be important. Tim Hardaway, before he got hurt, has been a pleasant surprise in terms of how he's played after the first 3 games. And, despite the home-heavy schedule, I'll say this. I am surprised that overall they found a way to be 16-14 after 30 games. It is a significant positive for them. They've been able to win some games that they shouldn't have won. They've had some really interesting fourth quarter comebacks at the Garden, coming back against Indiana, coming back against Charlotte, coming back against Denver after blowing a big lead when Denver still had Millsap in the lineup. So they've had some really good performances at home. They clearly have not been good on the road. And, I mean, you've heard this enough from me off the record that I think that this is starting, I would say, tomorrow with this Boston game. This stretch that's coming up for them. All of those things considered, if the Knicks were 5 games within 500 by the All-Star break, I would say this. I would be impressed. I would be impressed if they were.
Knicks fans love Enes Kanter, and I think it's because he provides effort and he rebounds and he does a lot and he can score in the paint, and so he brings sort of a traditional old school type of way of playing. But obviously, when you look at his stats, he has like a negative net rating. He gets outscored a lot, and we all know he's not a good defensive center. He's not a rim protector, so that's also a problem. But it's he, in a weird way, a lot of people like him, and so it's sort of changed. Like, even if necessarily they don't play well when he's on the court, or he sits a lot of fourth quarters, depending on who they play, it's tough because I feel like there's a weird bond between him and the Knicks. Like, things are positive. And then O'Quinn has been their best player net rating wise. He's been really solid. He's a solid, but he probably has the most value of any of their guys because he's on a good contract. I think he has an option after this year, but it's just he has the best value, but it makes it tough because he's probably their most important player, and it'd be different if they were, 10 games under 500 at this point, where you would say, oh, then you should trade him because you're not competing for a playoff spot. But right now, as they compete for a playoff spot, it makes it a lot harder to trade him. Hernan Gomez, they feel like, he's young and that he'll develop. I don't know. It's sort of like, I'm not sure if he really is as good as people think. I think he's a good offensive player. He's a good rebounder, but his defense is lacking. So it's going to be really hard to see him get consistent minutes, especially after the way that it's gone. And Noah is just an untradeable contract. So it's just, you have to hope, or you'd have to attach a first-round pick to get rid of him. And I don't think at this point, after the Knicks have given up so many first-round picks over the past 15 years, I don't think that this front office wants to take that route with getting rid of a player. I mean, they could always stretch and waive him, but you don't want that long-term salary on your books for like 5 or 6 years. So it's complicated. I think it's just all four of them are in weird positions where it's like, they value Hernan Gomez, Noah's untradeable, Kyle O'Quinn is what he is, he's good, and Cantor is, in a weird way, become a major attraction for the team. It's really hard. But it's hard because also Kristaps Porzingis should play center.
Yeah.
And you've seen them do that in a lot of games where he plays center in the fourth quarter, when the game's at the end. When they played the Lakers in that overtime win, he played center. So, it's hard.
Right. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. The reason I'm saying these numbers right now is I'm looking at the end of their schedule, like from February 24th on. They played 13 of their last 22 at home. So they will have played really the majority of their road games by like February 22nd. They're gonna play like it's such a disparity. Just looking at till the end of February, what it's gonna look like for them it's really daunting when you think about what their schedule is gonna be. So, in terms of playoffs, if they survive, if they were ever able to get to the All-Star break, like right around the playoffs, if they're like right there, then I would say they would have a decent shot at it. And to your point, I think finding a way to play more KP at center, and those lineups with KP at center and Lance at the 4 have been really effective down the stretch of games that they've been able to use them. Specifically in games that they've had to come back in. And if there were anything to worry about in particular, I know that their defense has been pretty decent for the most part, but I think they allow the most 3-point attempts in the league, and that's something that probably has to change if you're gonna expect something significant from them going forward. So, we'll have to see what happens with them. But so far, so good. It's hard to really complain when you didn't really expect much from this team to start the season.
I know. Definitely after 0-3, I was like, they're going to lose 60 games.
0-3 and not looking competitive.
Yeah, I thought they were going to lose 60. Because the Boston game was the one that really looked bad. Like, they did not look like they were even trying.
And you know what? That might be one of those situations where that's just a bad matchup for them, because the team with multiple wings that could defend and a couple of different guys that they could throw at Porzingis and a point guard that you can't even hope to guard. That's their kryptonite for sure. Those are the things that they can't handle, and like that, the elite teams in the league are more likely than not are going to give them a lot of problems. Like specifically Boston, Houston, teams like that who have been able to, just have versatile players that are able to play multiple positions and have the length to defend Porzingis a little bit, and are able to exploit a lot of the Knicks' weaknesses at point guard and center defensively.
So I guess this would be like a good final topic or something else to touch on. Since it was one of the bigger things, I know you're a big fan, or I don't know if you are still, but Kobe Bryant, he got his jersey retired.
Yeah.
8-24, 2 days ago.
It's pretty impressive.
And I know us growing up, you were a humongous Kobe fan. And you had number 8. I don't know if you ever had number 24. Did you have his number 24 jersey?
Yes, I think I did. Yeah, I think I do. I have to find the jersey. It's somewhere. But I do have a 24. Yeah, it was a gold 24.
Oh, so you had both. You had 8 and 24. Okay.
Yeah, I had the 8 in black.
Yeah, I remember that jersey.
Yeah, I had the 8 in black.
Before they actually did start wearing black. Yeah, so, the Lakers are in a really interesting position, and I guess I'd start off first by asking you, how did it feel to see him? I know you probably just ended up watching it, online or whatever, but what did you think about him getting his retirement and Kobe as a person, player, I don't know, from your time as, a fan of him? You weren't really a fan of the Lakers, but you were a fan of Kobe.
Okay, I don't want to make this, too serious of a thing, but
I'm wondering where this is going.
No, well, the reason why I say that is, and Tom Ziller addressed this today, because I know they had the Isiah Magic little reunion thing on NBA TV last night, and I know it was a very emotional moment for the two. Just seeing a couple of the clips, I'd like to see the whole thing, but behind all that, you still have Isaiah Thomas, who has a sordid history of a lot of different types of issues that I don't want to go deep into, but obviously we tend to not consider them, yet he's still a prominent person in TV and media and stuff like that. And when I was younger, I just didn't care about the whole Kobe Colorado situation in 2004. It's just it doesn't matter, whatever, I just care about the basketball. So now as time goes on, and you get older and you kind of see a lot of the stuff that's happening in present day life in Hollywood and basically in all forms of life, and when it comes to misogyny and stuff like that, I can be yeah, I appreciate the player. Yeah, don't get me wrong. I loved everything that Kobe did from a player standpoint, and he was one of the more interesting basketball players to watch. And even with those last couple of seasons being as tough as they were to stomach with his injury and trying to come back, and then of course that last farewell season, which was really tough to watch because it just it was really, really difficult from the standpoint of seeing how diminished he was, and that part was tough. But if I want to think about it from a moral standpoint, if I wanted to be really honest about it, it's you have to kind of look at the way that he's celebrated so much, and it's you have to juxtapose yourself with I want to give somebody a second chance in terms of what they do. But then at the same time, it's man, he's being so celebrated. Yeah, he did something that was in a lot of circles, it's just really not good. So as time has gone on, my thinking on this has been, not necessarily that my thinking has changed, but I've been forced to think about it as I've gotten older and I've become more self-aware. So that's where, for me, it's okay, cool, he got his jersey retired, and it was nice to see, obviously they had a lot of different types of tributes, and a lot of the Hall of Famers were at the Staples Center that night. It was cool to see him dap up Allen Iverson, and obviously Shaq, Bill Russell, a lot of different guys were there. And it was cool to see him celebrate it. But I guess I don't have the same fanaticism that I had for him before. And yeah, it's not just the moral stuff. It's just the realistic of those last couple of seasons were really bad, and he probably should have, and he shouldn't have stayed as long as he did. And besides that 60-point game, the rest of that season was just so awful, and I thought he undercut the development of that team and kind of messed them up in a way. But I know part of it is also on the Lakers too, because they wanted to make money off of his last season, and they were able to successfully do that. So that's a part of it as well. So it's not completely his fault, but at the same time, it's damn, it's like I really do wonder. Like, yeah, of course, as a fan, I'm always gonna like enjoy those Kobe moments. I'll always be on YouTube looking at his 2003 season, his 2006 season, which were my two personal favorites. Where he was just at his peak at athletically, in terms of scoring and being able to just the way he would hoist 3-pointers and just make them so effortlessly, hitting shots against multiple defenders and stuff like that. He had some obviously great playoff moments in the future with and without Shaq, and so all of those things considered, all of those things great. But then I also realized I watch the basketball that I watch now, and it's so much better than the basketball that he played in a lot of different ways. So it's like there's so much. It's like, you know, you evolve and stuff, and all of those things change. So I feel like I'm in a different spot with Kobe than I used to be. Which like I think about it now as I say, and I say, wow, I can't believe that I actually ended up here. Saying it is like I would have never said this stuff 10 years ago, but you know, here we are.
I know, I'm shocked you didn't turn out to be that guy on Twitter who was defending Kobe at every chance.
Yeah, it's hard. Like, it's a lot of the stuff is hard to defend. Like, one thing that I think LeBron has taught a lot of people is like in your face, demean your teammates, yell, take every shot. Like, it doesn't have to be that way. And I think, you know, that I mean, and LeBron obviously, you know, people could say that he has his warts as well, but is a great example of two different types of leadership. Not everybody has to be that Kobe, Michael Jordan type of way. It just doesn't have to be that way. You can lead a different type of way, and I think that's what's beautiful about sports is there are different types of personalities that, you know, can have success. It doesn't have to necessarily be one way. So when you hear the guys, you know, pundits be like, well, he doesn't have killer instinct, it's like, yeah, what really is that? What killer instinct? Nah, it's just one dude is like really good.
It's just a video game.
He's just better than everybody else, and that's more what it is than actual, like, in the last 2 minutes of a game, one guy just wants it more and just has more heart than another guy. It's just, it's not that. It's just this dude happens to be better. And in basketball, you know, it tends to be like Kobe for a lot of the time was better than most of the guys in the league, and just like LeBron is. So that's, you know, that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, Killer Instinct was also just a video game.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I've never played it, but I know it's a video game. And, you know, you brought up something with the Isiah thing. I thought that was interesting, too, is like, I watched a couple of the segments. I didn't watch the whole thing, but it's just, you know, it's a lack of acknowledgement that why they had issues, and it's like it's barely touched upon, and so it makes it a lot more complicated because it's like then it's not really being real because it's sort of a version of the truth rather than a full like, you know, unabashed, like, clear truth about what happened. And so I guess for whatever reason they put it in the past, which I guess is good, but at the same time, like you said, like, it's just sort of like it leaves you wondering. And it obviously is uncomfortable whether we talk about Isiah's situation or we talk about Kobe's stuff. Like, it's uncomfortable for them, obviously, to talk about it because it brings so much, you know, negative aspects from their life, and I understand that. But, like, you know, for us as people viewing, you want to understand, like, you know, deeper beyond that rather than just, oh, it didn't happen, and then you just move on like it never was never was a subject, and I think that's what makes it more complicated.
Well, I think that's the thing. A lot of people have more than, you could say that they don't talk about it, but I think what's even more interesting is people have chosen to ignore it. So
yeah, I guess so. Yeah, because I saw a lot of positive reaction about the conversation that Isiah and Magic had, but it was something that, like, when I first saw that NBA TV was doing this special, I had to Google. I was like, why did they have a falling out? And then I saw that it was because of Magic's, you know, HIV situation, and Isiah saying negative things about, or Magic saying that he heard from other people that Isiah was saying negative things about him. regarding that, you know, that's a serious thing. And so it's like weird that they really wouldn't explain how they, you know, how they got over that. Because just because, like, it's a lot to swallow and just say, I'm just going to forgive you for spreading, you know, false rumors about me. And, or like, you know, like, you don't understand the process. Did Isiah say, yes, I did this and I'm sorry behind the scenes, or he's still stuck to his, no, I didn't say this? And you don't know. Like, you just don't know. So it's really complicated. But I mean,
no, it's true. You're right. Yeah, you're 100% right. You can't really tell what's what. And anytime that you have a conversation about Isiah, there's like I had said before, it's gonna be always like, this guy is like, he's still in a prominent position on television, and he has so many things in his past, and it's like, it's really weird that people just kind of ignore it.
Yeah.
And yeah. I mean, like, what you call it? I mean, for them, it's a good. I'm sure it's probably a positive moment, because for them to work past it, or whatever issues that they have, is a good thing. And I guess we can't always know and see every single thing that happens between, you know, whether it's stars or athletes or whatever, and how they, you know, kind of make up from whatever circumstances that they have. And it's like, it's so hard, because on one side you want to be like, okay, I want to give people second chances, but then on the other side, it's like, man, second chances for like doing something really horrible, it's like it's very difficult. So it really puts you in a really difficult position, morally, I would say.
Word. Well, we talked about some trades. We even talked about current topics going on, like Isiah and Magic Johnson's little conversation on NBA TV this week, and Kobe's retirement, and Anthony Davis. Is he gone? I don't know.
Is he gone?
I think a lot of people think he is gone. But this has been the NBA Trades Podcast. Anthony, thank you for joining the NBA Trades Podcast. As always, you could check out Anthony's book. Andy, tell him a little bit. I remember we talked about it, but this is like 2 or 3 months ago. So
it's been a long time. I shouldn't have left you. Shout out to Selfish, the poetry book, available now, and be a nice little Christmas gift you could get for your people. It's a very heartfelt book, very human story. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it on Barnes and Noble. It's available as an ebook, as an iBook. At all, you can get it there. Thanks for the pub. Obviously, you can follow me on Twitter at AC Spotlight 95 with an S. You can check out my podcast, AC Spotlight, which Ralph comes on. We're gonna do a little holiday episode later this week, which should be fun. And you can check me out on those platforms. Thank you for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
Follow me on Twitter, NBA_trades, where I tweet random things about history. You can also subscribe to the podcast, NBA Trades Podcast, on iTunes, on Google, and what else are we on? Oh, Stitcher, and YouTube too. I started posting the podcast on YouTube, so you can always check it out. And peace out.